So in the Wesley Bible study I've been attempting to get off the ground, had a few people on, it's been good. We've been looking at the creation stories in Genesis because they form such a foundational part of the kind of understanding that the biblical narrative has of the whole way everything works. So it's a good place to start. And in that narrative we've looked at the way the creation was organised, which is the notion of creation in the ancient Near Eastern mind. It's about organising things for a purpose, and they're most definitely organised for the purpose of seeing human beings flourish, which is great to be reminded of. And then we see the climax of creation, which is actually the creation of men and women who are together made in the image of God. And we looked at that, and that there was also this mysterious thing about a couple of trees in the middle of the garden. All the trees and the plants and everything were given to all the living creatures to eat for food. And then there's these two trees in the middle of the garden, one which you can eat from, which is the tree of life, and the other, which interestingly, God says, the day that you eat of that tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And I've just been reflecting on that because it doesn't say on the day that you eat of that, I will surely kill you. It's almost like a cause and effect. If you eat from that tree, that process of deciding to eat from that tree, that's going to be really bad for you. So, yeah, judgment of God or just consequence of action? Interesting question. And as we move into chapter 3, there's the little interaction between the snake and Eve and then Adam, whereupon the snake raises the broad and interesting question, just asking, did God say you couldn't eat of any of the trees? And the woman who says, oh no, we can eat of all the trees, except one, of course, and we're not allowed to eat from that or even touch it, which going further than God had said, because it didn't say you couldn't touch it, just don't eat it. And then the snake tricks Eve into thinking that she's missing out on something that she'd never realised she was missing out on up until that point. But it was the suggestion that there's more there that God is holding out on by not letting them, or by warning them against doing a certain thing. And here is a deep truth about the reality of sin. It's a promise that is never kept. It's the promise that there's more there. If you just do these things, you'll discover stuff you've never known before. That part is true, but it suggests there'll be good things, and that part isn't true. The things we've never discovered before and wish we'd never discovered at all. So that was chapter 3, and then we come into chapter 4. So I'm walking uphill, not as fit as I used to be. And in chapter 4 we have the children of Adam and Eve. Cain, who's the eldest, and he grows crops, and Abel, who is the younger of the two, and he keeps herds and flocks, and they come to offer their sacrifices before God. And again, I'm just noticing the subtleties of what's said in the text, and the text indicates that Cain just offered some of his stuff, doesn't really refer to what it was, just some of his grain. And Abel, he found the choicest bits of his flock and offered those as sacrifices. And so many questions there, right? Who said we should sacrifice to a god anyway? And isn't that a waste of resources? And what's going on with all of that? And goodness knows what. But there is this really interesting thing which I would encourage you to think about for a moment. Whenever we offer a sacrifice, we're kind of acknowledging that there is something bigger than simply us. And in our secular world today, the assumption of the notion of God is by no means a given. Most people probably are agnostic about that at best, or atheistic in the sense that they really believe there is no God. Note the way I said that. They really believe there is no God. Just as I really believe there is, they really believe there isn't. And fair enough too, there's all sorts of questions you might have around that. But there is this dynamic that if you offer a sacrifice to a God, and if that God is a good God, then it has the impact of constraining your sense of reality and holding it within a context that there is a good God looking on and looking after. When you do away with that, everything comes down to essentially me and you, and I'm going to look after me because I know you're going to look after you, and suddenly we're in competition with each other, and that can get quite nasty quite quickly. But when there's a God that holds the whole thing in place, we acknowledge that that one is bigger than both of us and holds both of us together. And that is no small thing. In today's secular world, in our modern liberal democracies, we have the rule of law, and the rule of law actually kind of functions as a quasi-God for us, because that is the thing we must obey, or that we indeed choose to obey, and clearly not everybody does, and clearly some people very deliberately choose not to. But we need something bigger than simply us to hold us together, to keep the structure of our society and our community strong, because if it comes down to simply me versus you or you versus me, the war of all against all, as Hobbes would put it, then we are in strife. So worshipping God and offering a sacrifice to God could sound a bit kind of meaningless, could sound a bit like a waste of resources, could sound like why would you bother? But in actual fact, it does serve a really vital role in the maintenance of healthy community and safe society. So if you want to come along on Thursday at 1 o'clock in the Reg Walker room at Wesley, we will talk about Genesis chapter 4, Cain and Abel. Of course, you know the end of that story is that Cain gets jealous because Abel's sacrifice is acceptable before God. I gotta wonder, what does that even mean and how would you know? But there you are. Somehow they knew, and Cain got terribly jealous of Abel, and so took him out on a picnic and cut his throat. Nice picnic. You might say that was no picnic. Dad jokes. It's one of the things that happens when you become a dad. Your sense of humour goes off. Probably enough for me. If you've listened this long, you've done very well. See you around the college. God bless. Stay faithful. Think about what is most important to you. What do you effectively worship? Because even though we don't believe in God these days, we all have things that are most important to us, the things that we obey and that, in effect, at the end of the day, are functionally as God to us. So whether you are a believer or not, you will have a God. Might as well make it a good one, I reckon. See you soon.